Got started? All right, so I guess now we'll just discuss, like, we can just take a vote. If you guys want to just give a brief opinion about all of that, I'll say this. I mean, I did take the opportunity, like I discussed, to meet with all, not meet, but send them a list of questions, gave them a week to think about it, and then called them, so they had plenty of time to advance copy of my questions that I had, and some of them had the same questions again, and what they all did, but definitely, all of them are super nice guys. I mean, just hands down. I mean, there's nobody. So it's one of those tough situations where it's like when you like them all as people, but then you start looking into the things like, experience, background, culture fit, or communication skills or stuff like that. Just preparedness or trying to be as objectionable as possible. And I know that I had a lot of questions that were pretty, just personally for me, very objectionable. I try to be as objective as possible. I didn't know, the only candidate I knew was Russ, and so I had not personally met any of the candidates to them until they came tonight. And like Mr. Sittler, I met him for the first time on the election day, the November elections. So I never met or just talked with him until a phone conversation in that day. So it's been an interesting process getting to know these guys. So it's definitely a hard process. But like I discussed before, the intention of this ad hoc, is that ideally, if we get three votes, somebody advances on, and if it's 2 and 2 or 3 and 1 to no, it doesn't. But it doesn't preclude that. I think the legislative committee from pulling somebody forward. As far as these candidates there. So I just, as far as a body, because our body is kind of like as a recommendation, positive or negative at the end of the day, to move forward. It's kind of like how committee on committee works. It's like you can't prevent somebody from going to the full floor as for committee on committees for the candidates versus just moving that forward legislative. So I just wanted to set that as a tone of no matter what happens. I mean, it's just not the end of the world. Like it's if nothing happens. I mean, so it's not like, oh, we didn't get anybody out of here. So it doesn't mean nothing stops. But I mean, I don't know if you guys want to discuss or just want to basically just kind of just take a roll call vote up or down, like on each person, your thoughts on advancing them to legislative. I'm okay just doing a vote. I kind of have my own opinions.
My personal feeling is that probably for me, Mr. Coleman is probably enough.
Okay,
so you're ready to do it? You just want to do a roll
we'll just
call?
Okay, well, we'll start with Mr. Coleman. So a roll call vote with Craig.
I mean, I had my lowest numbers, and if we have to whittle it down at all, he's we're talking about Coleman, right?
Yes.
Yes. Great guy, though. Like you said.
Yeah, I think he's a good
like
guy,
said,
but he's a no for me.
Yeah. All right, Shannon.
No.
No for Mr. Coleman. I will be a no as well, Mr. Coleman. So how about I guess we'll start Craig with Jerome Cochran. Yes or no?
Yes.
Craig.
I'm a yes.
Shannon.
No.
All right. I'm also a no for Mr. Cochran. We'll go to next in line, Mr. Sittler. Craig.
No.
I'm a no.
Yes.
All right. I'm also a yes on Mr. Sittler. Mr. Edwards.
Yes.
Mark.
I'm a yes.
No.
And I also am a no on Mr. Edwards. So at this point, I guess we're at an impasse. Nobody.
Oh, it did it really?
Technically, we did not get 3 votes on.
Well, let me ask you this: since there's only 4, is there anything wrong with passing through? You know what I mean? Are we wanting to wing down to 1 or 2, or what's the purpose of this committee? You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any preconceived ideas on whether we if we had 30 candidates, if we put forward 7 people, I don't know. But I think you said you had some commissioner express that they only wanted like 1 candidate. I don't know. So I mean,
and that's kind of my thing, because you 3 being commissioners, what are you looking for from this board if you weren't on this board? Is kind of what my question would be. What would you expect?
A few have asked that there would be 1 candidate and it would be an up or down vote at the floor.
Okay.
Since we're doing the process, this
Right.
process.
Which I get. I kind of agree with that. I kind of like that.
Rather than the vote off like they did the roll call vote. like they did with the judges in August.
Jim, you being the chair of this committee, we think about us just have a little, not really open debate, but just kind of discussion about each, maybe see if we can kind of fill in the holes or maybe where some of these candidates
Sure,
are.
if you want to do,
That's just a suggestion, you know what I mean, if we're at an impasse, I mean. I'm
well,
trying to-
yeah, I'm happy to share, you know, I'll just share based on my score. I'll be glad to give you kind of my ranking. And Jerome Cochran was last on my scoring, fourth out of four. Jason Coleman was third. Russ Edwards was a second, and Eric Sittler was first on my scoring based on questions and objectivity. So for me, so that's if I'm scoring a ranking, my 1 and 2 are Mr. Sittler and Mr. Edwards as 1 and 2 on a ranking. So that's I'm going by my own scoring.
Do we want to try like tallying by our ranking and see how that comes out at the end? You know what I mean? I'm just trying to be open-minded about this. Cause,
Well, I'll offer my ranking. I had Russ 1, and I had Jerome and Mr. Sumner kind of at 2A, 2B, I guess you'd say. Mr. Coleman was way down my list.
that's just about exactly the way, because literally Coleman and Cochran for me were tied up with numbers, literally, for a second.
So who was your first?
Russ.
And you said Coleman and who was tied up for second?
No, Sittler and Cochran.
And Coleman was your last.
Correct.
What about you, Shannon?
Cochran was my last. Coleman was second. Russ was third. Well, you know what I'm saying. I preferred Eric to Russ and Coleman to Cochran.
You do the same thing?
Yeah, it's pretty much the same thing. I mean, it's just kind of a split. You know.
Does it narrow down to 2? I mean, is it?
For me, it seems that.
Well, we can take Coleman off.
Yeah, I mean, I say we mark off. I think it's Coleman's was a no, so I mean that is a mark off. So if we're looking at 3 left, but obviously you guys had.
It almost sounds to me like it's kind of Mr. Edwards and Mr. Sittler.
Yeah,
that's kind
that's
of the way it's coming across.
I mean,
to me.
I'm going to knock off, you know, Mr. Cochran for that reason, as well as far as just being, you know, Sittler and Edwards. If I'm going to be objective, one thing for me that has, like I said, it's a hard call, knowing, you know, both of these. I've known Russ forever, but not super nice guys. I mean, so if I'm going to go in spot mode and be objective, looking at background for me and history based on, I know the goals for this majority of this commission. Mr. Sittler's background in biology, his military experience, as well as dealing with TDEC, land use, water, environmental, flooding control issues, as well as real estate law, working with the annexation stuff. I read on his, you know, he submitted a bio sheet previously to us when he came through, as well as his resume. Having the experience with basically dealing with planning and zoning and growth and the water control issues, which are the biggest issues we face in this county as far as like objectives of the commission. And when I look at that background, that's what put it higher for me, just from a resume experience and experiential standpoint for background for Mr. Sittler. And that's why he was my number 1, looking objectively out of these 4 remaining candidates out of the 8 that we originally had applied. And I did speak to 7 of them out of the 8. I didn't speak to the accountant, but I did spend time, an hour and a half, I'll have 2 hours on the phone with each of them. I know Shannon met with all the ones as well. So just looking at that, and for me it was just temperament as well, and just for me it was important for the non-political aspect of this job and being apolitical. And I'm not looking for a lobbyist. I'm not looking for somebody to be a legislator in this position. And so that to me put Mr. Sittler above just because of his non-political associations and affiliations, just out of an unbiased perspective of just, you know, the role of being an advisory when called upon, but not, you know, in being that capacity. So that was my rationale, just to, and, you know, when I was hearing, if I've got to push over a bump, I mean, honestly, I think he did the best for me answering the questions, the most purest to what my ideals are and what my values are and what I believe the Constitution reads at. Mr. Sittler scored higher than everybody else in all my questions on those related questions. So that was why, for me, he got the higher scores based on pure scoring. But that was my process to internalize that. Just
He was your number one too, right? Sittler.
Yeah, he's my number one because he was, when I talked to them all separately, he was the only one who wanted the job purely because he wanted the job. Like, he called, when can I apply for this job?
Oh, yeah, we talked about that before.
Yes, and, of course, the conflict with the alderman situation, and should he go ahead and run his race, and I was like, there are no guarantees, so do you need to go ahead and do, because he wants to help his community and his county, where he, like he said, he didn't say anything different here than what he had told me initially.
So did he reach out to you?
So-
You said when it became
Yes,
open,
he
that
called
was in
me.
July, I guess, or because that's when the position came.
He actually called me on September 1st because, and I remember that because I was sitting outside sweating September 1st. Like, not being able to eat, nervous about our first meeting. So that's how I remember that. And then he came to the first legislative meeting of his own volition. Like, he contacted me, because we're neighbors, I guess. But to say that I knew him before then would be wrong, because I did not know him before I ran for office. I mean, I knew who he was, but I didn't know him. So, and I like his background with TDEC. I like having worked with the state, and especially coming from Hendersonville, because water is everywhere and it's a huge problem. Collected effluent is an enormous problem all over this county. So that I liked about him too, and I like that he's honest and the apolitical part too. Because I just want an honest attorney. That doesn't mean that the others aren't. It's just that I prefer Eric too. And then Russ was my second choice. But there again, you've got that same, he ran for judge. When I discussed that with him, he ran for judge. Is this what he would really want to do, leave private practice and come here and be,
I think he got the same issue with Mr. Sittler, because he ran for alderman, and he's in private practice.
Yes, but I just felt like Mr. Sittler's initiative was there first. Like truly wanting it. Like, I want somebody here that wants to be here. Wants to be here. No doubt about it, wants to be here. So, and that's, a feeling thing.
Sure.
I'm torn, to be honest with you. I mean, I want what's best for the county, regardless. What's gonna help you guys, you three, on the commission. Fight your battles that you need to be fought. Stand by your side when it needs to be stood by, things like that. I think both of them would do a great job at that. So it comes down to those things, experience or, drive or, those things
Well, I spoke to some of my constituents and that at my church that are just in the county, and they don't want Nashville. They don't want they don't want anything from the state in the county. They don't want anything from up here, up there, down here. That puts Jerome Cochran out. So, and then I would consider too that he's been a judge. I mean, to be a judge and then to come here to have that freedom and then to come to a 40, 60, 70 hour work week where you're tied and you're 24/7, the freedom that you would have. Again, it goes back to that. Is this really what you want to do?
Is that the
Not
feeling
because-
you guys
and
are
he's-
getting? Is that the Russ thing? Is you know what I mean? Which I get.
Yeah,
I'm not like,
well, I mean, like I said, I've known Russ a long time, so it's hard to be somewhat I mean, I'm trying to be objective, and it's like, and I went through this process with him when he ran for judge, you know, and ran a great race but lost, but then wanted to be appointed judge. And I talked to Russ, you know, and just, I'll be candid, you know, when he, you know, because I talked to over half of the judges who are people who are running, the lawyers and are running, and Russ asked me if I would support him as kind of a first round, and I had to, honestly, I told him no. And the reason why is because of, basically, there was some votes on Bomo and things, how I think he voted that I didn't agree with. And I was like, well, if I can't trust your judgment necessarily there, it was like, comes to the judge. And he's like, well, if I make it to the second round, it's like, so I said yes. So it's like, basically, first, it was more for me the integrity of the process. And I was very candid with Russ, and so it was good. But then I did vote for him in the second round, you know, and he was the second pick. But it was, for that was from a judgment standpoint. But I think, I know there's, I think, questioning of what motivation is, and out of everybody that I talked to, what surprised me, like I said, I didn't know Mr. Sittler at all until it's only the second time I've seen him or met him, and then talked to him on the phone when we did my interview. And you know, the thing that he said to me, because I asked him, I was kind of like, well, you just ran for alderman, you know, are you like, but he sort of shared the same thing Shannon for me was, had he not, he didn't know about it, he'd already started that process of running. So it's like, you know, I know it's kind of a weird situation that an individual to be in that, and I feel bad about that. But he's never run for office before. It was just a first time thing. But he told me he's looking just to serve and give back to his community, like he said. Here, he told me on the phone of you know, he doesn't, his kids are older, you know, he's in his early mid-50s. I mean, it's I'm going to get some kind of lawsuit because I said that, but Ben might get on to me for that one. But you know, just because of where he is in his station of life, he said that he's could be here and commit on all the meetings. But it was more of just of he really feels like, and I asked him, well, why would you want to do this or be an alderman? He said he feels, based on his background and experience and capacity, he could serve the county better in this capacity than he could as an alderman in Hendersonville if he had, if he's being honest with himself. And it was basically about how can he give back the most. And he just was more just about, I just want to do this to give back. And I know, you know, some said that as well, so I appreciate that. And Russ said that. And obviously, Russ has a very long history of civic duty and charitable organizations and boards and things like that. So, but a long pedigree on that. But for me, for what I'm looking for the law director, especially having been in this seat for 4 years and having odds with opinions from the previous commission and legal odds and problems with advice given, was somebody looking outside of our political system, for lack of better words. That was important to me. Even while out of county was also important. I think I was okay with that because of somebody that's kind of coming in here pure eyes and not affiliated, not associated. And so I appreciated him saying he's apolitical standpoint of just really, I could see the analytical, logical aspect of it. Is this the right thing to do, or is this the reasonable or unreasonable thing to do, or is this the ethical thing to do? And how am I going to advise you on that? And then what are your risks and benefits and analysis and rewards? And so I appreciated his candor in that for Mr. Sittler. But for me, it really came down to my questions about constitutionality of things, because that's very important to me. Like I said, Mr. Sittler scored the highest marks of any of the candidates I interviewed out of all of them. There was one that came right behind him, but he withdrew. Another good candidate, but then Russ was my third in line at that point, but now he's my second in line as far as like answering my questions just from a constitutionality standpoint, understanding the constitutional issues and some of these questions here, and even tonight. So I mean, that's why for me Mr. Sittler scored above, and it wasn't like a cult of personality because I don't know him, but it was like I just felt more of a calming, stable presence as far as an even keel dedication to the county and him as a candidate, just personally, as far as like not looking towards anything else, not looking for anything outside of this versus like just looking to this, and that was that narrow focus. Does that make sense? So that was important to me as far as culture fit, as far as marking that down. So that was my reasoning, like I said. And again, Russ came in second, but I mean, there are more caveats with Russ's experience or just affiliations in that sense, and truly really knowing, is this what you want to do versus like, I know he wants to be a judge, so.
And when I met with these four, well, I had not met with Eric. He was the only one that I had not met with prior to this, but of the four, one who has withdrawn. Jason Coleman, I liked him. I preferred him and his answers and his confidence and his ability to research and do what he needed to do to defend the commission and the county, and represent us well. But the fact that he's had 4 weeks and he hasn't even watched a commission meeting. And then Jerome Cochran, when I had met with him, I said, have you even watched a commission meeting? No, I haven't. He had no idea that we were in commission till 11 o'clock at night. The interest, and he just said it was a new challenge and a ceiling, and he has met his ceiling.
Yeah, I recall
so
saying,
I want someone here who wants to be here.
just not another notch or.
Not another occupational hazard or just a lateral move, just a.
So if it's between Eric Sittler and Jerome Cochran, that is why I would take Sittler over him, absolutely. Because I want someone who desires the position. And not so he can take his grandkids with him to meet the mayor. No offense. So.
Always have it.
So.
How about you?
When I talked to, I talked to Jerome, I talked to one of the other candidates that dropped out, and I've talked with Russ. I had never met Mr. Sittler until tonight.
Mm-hmm.
I had 2 questions personally for them that, for me, are extremely important. I'm not an attorney.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a banker. Your website design, you own a trophy shop, okay? I need an attorney to tell me what I need to hear, even if I don't want to hear it. And that was the question that I asked them is, will you give me sound advice, even if everybody on the commission disagrees? I think it's very perilous for any organization, whether it be the county commission, whether it be a church, whether it be whoever, to create an echo chamber where we just get the answers we want.
Well,
That's very perilous. Yeah. And so, so I appreciated their candor in that. For me, my familiarity, I think, with Russ and his experience with the inner workings of the meetings and that kind of thing, his commitment to be there, do his own research, to me, that is kind of my overriding factor.
Well, they all answered that well. Mr. Cochran seemed to be not as, Russ and Eric answered that well, that it was their job to give advice, and lots of people didn't follow it, and they don't go
Sure.
they don't even do what their doctor tells them to do.
Sure.
So in that, you are correct. In my opinion, they are our top 2 candidates.
Yeah, I'd ask,
And it's hard, that is a hard choice for me, like, between those 2.
understand.
So,
well, it's, I think Mr. Sitt was the only one that actually volunteered the answer to that question you were asking.
Sure.
When I talked on the phone, but I remember that. I'd taken notes, and I can't remember when I wrote it down because I tried to type when I was listening. And that he said he's going to give me the answer that he thinks is right, whether I want to hear it or not. And so that's when I think that's. When he says apolitical, that's what I think of. It's not just because Jeremy Manson wants to hear this. Like, what's my opinion on it? And I asked all the candidates, like, one, what's your personal opinion, or what's your professional opinion, or it's okay to say I don't know. Like, I need to research it. And it was just, I precluded all those. So I try to be as objective as I can. Like, hey, that's why I gave them all my questions a week in advance. I had 16 questions, and from land use, from COVID, from constitutionality stuff, from school stuff. I mean, just all kind of questions. And try to give them a week to think about it so they could cheat. Talk. I mean, I wasn't like catching anybody in the aha moment. I mean, it truly was like,
right.
Get back to me next week and we'll talk about it. And so I appreciated all the answers, but I remember Mr. Sittler saying that. But I guess, so I know that a positive for you is just familiarity with process, I guess you said is an overriding factor for us, but that to me was not enough to push over based on all the hard-hitting questions of constitutionality issues and a lot of experience of like when I was just trying to be objective, like anybody can learn how to operate a meeting versus like comes down to really core values and how you answer instinctively and impulsively, or based on constitutional issues, to me was important with things. And there were some similar answers given, but for me, Mr. Sittler just raw above, like in discussing things and understanding contract law, even that caught my ear tonight when he said about even the constitutionality of the governor shutting down businesses based on what he deems appropriate or not. He even cited, I was like, hey, well, let me pull out my PDF of my U.S. Constitution I got on my desktop. My Tennessee's Constitution, Article 1 of Section 20 says Tennessee can make no law, a constitution that violates or creates a breach of contract, period. The entire COVID thing did all of that. Like, it was all unconstitutional, just on that fact alone. So, but I was just appreciative of his understanding of that as a contract lawyer.
And Russ actually pointed that as well.
Yeah. So, because I asked both of them these questions.
Yeah.
So they both.
Yeah, I don't think we've got. I would be stunned if we had anybody sitting on this county commission that felt like that there was anything fair about essential versus non-essential. I mean, I didn't wear a mask for months. The only time I wore a mask is when my wife got so house buggy that she had to go to Hobby Lobby. I said, okay, I'll take you to Hobby Lobby and I'll put on a mask for you. She's the only individual on this planet that I put a mask on for. And that's the only reason why. So I don't think we've got anybody sitting on this county commission that is looking to mask up or anything like that. I don't see that. And I don't see any way in the world that anybody's gonna come to my house and get my guns. That's just not gonna happen. But that being said, I mean, and that's probably way down the rabbit hole. But yeah, well, I don't care. I don't care. Let Sonny watch this. That's fine.
I agree. Well, that's why I asked the question.
Yeah, no, I
flag
understand.
law is constitutional, and
Yes.
as you know, I pushed for it and had a.
And I know you do.
Second sanctuary. So it was an important question of
Sure.
the law, doctrine of lesser magistrate, and understanding that, and what's constitutional versus not. So I definitely appreciate the answers. So, but I mean, I don't know if, again, my position hasn't changed on my votes. So I mean, obviously we've ruled out, I think, Mr. Cochran and Mr. Coleman as candidates.
Do you think it would be appropriate to forward maybe a motion to a positive recommendation for those two and let the legislative committee decide? I mean, it wouldn't preclude anybody from bringing somebody to the floor.
Yeah, I guess not. So yeah, I mean, I'm fine doing that if we, knowing that you guys, it's opposite ones and twos, it sounds like, for different reasons. But I mean, I don't, what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, it's fine with me.
I think the county
Yeah.
be served well, either candidate.
Yeah,
You know
so-
what I mean? I think we're splitting hairs here,
Yeah.
almost. You know what I mean? It's
Sure, I'm fine with sending forward, that to legislative on the 12th, as far as Mr. Sittler and Mr. Edwards, as far as.
I think that's what we should.
I guess a recommendation as a committee, since we actually were able to whittle down to.
Yeah.
you know, because it's, right now, we're just at a stalemate, you know, of nobody got through. So I think we've had some good discussions and pros and cons.
And they're all nice, they're all
Oh, yeah.
excellent people, but
Let me ask this question, and I agree with you, I hope I didn't cut you off. I didn't.
oh, no.
Is the application still up on the website?
Till tomorrow.
Till tomorrow.
December the 1st is what we passed.
So there's nothing that says that we didn't get one tonight,
Correct.
Oh,
so.
Or
that would be
tomorrow.
awesome.
Or yes,
Yay!
or tomorrow.
We would need to do a special call meeting for next week.
Sure,
To do the
absolutely.
30-minute interview.
Absolutely.
And that's what I was gonna ask, the timeline we're working on, because I know that,
December the 12th is legislative. We're going to talk about this. Obviously, I'm going to bring forward, you know, our recommendations. I guess if we're going to agree, I need to take a vote. We're in ad hoc, so we'll just.
right.
I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
we're in agreement with these.
So,
these
and
things.
we'll just discuss it legislative and see what we want to do from there. So, but that's on the 12th, so a week and a half from now. And then push to the full commission on the 19th. And make
Okay,
an
so it
up and
would
down
be
vote.
before,
The
Well,
19th.
Ben,
right, that was my
leaves the
concern.
27th.
Correct. No, the goal is for the commission to make a decision on the 19th. So that's.
And that actually was a question I meant to ask them, is what's their exit strategy and would they need time to transition?
I
You know what I mean?
I
So
actually
far.
did ask that too.
I got it to 2 or 3 of them. I got a hold of all of them except Coleman. I talked to all of them, but yeah, that's the one question I meant to.
I did get a chance to ask Mr. Sittler because Ben had emailed me, and he's the only one I hadn't talked to yet, and so I didn't get to ask the question to the other ones prior. But Mr. Sittler's answer was that he could start immediately and wind down his practice on the side with outside help. So I don't know what anybody else's answers were because he's the only one I got a chance to ask. When Ben proposed that question to me, I said, "Great question." He gave me 3 options. You know, and that's typically what a judge does. The judge immediately gets seated, and then they have 6 months to wind down their practice, and that's the same kind of situation. So, so that was Mr. Sittler was be ready to go on the 20th.
That's what y'all covered.
Yeah, I don't
want any
think
downtime
Russ
either.
had any trouble with it either.
So yeah, I don't see that. So all right. Well, I guess that's will be our recommendations.
Yeah.
You know, to move forward to legislative, and I can share 2 positives for Edwards, 2 positives for Sittler as far as 1 and 2. You know,
And literally, they're 1, 2, 2, 1. I mean,
Yeah.
literally.
So, but thank you guys. I was glad to be able to at least we've made some progress.
Oh, yeah.
In the process of elimination, so which I think is very helpful. So it's ironic that we have 2 aldermen and 2 lawyers as our.
Yeah, I just didn't even realize that. Yeah.
So when, yes. it's been
So,
a-
all right. Well, we will just conclude this meeting, and thank you guys so much for going through this process.
Sure.